Selected parts from the book Lone Fox Dancing Autobiography by Ruskin. Part 11. School closed for the 3 months of winter, and I was in the train, the steam engine snorting and chugging its way through the fields and forests of the eastern Doon, bringing me to the mother I had not seen in almost 3 years. Early morning in Doon Valley was always beautiful. I looked out of the carriage window as we passed over a small river, a tributary of the Ganga. A herd of elephants was walking into the clear waters. The train slowed down as it took the gentle slopes of the valley. Fields of sugarcane and yellow mustard stretched away on either side. Village children ran out of their homes to wave to the passing train. Sometimes I waved back. Compartment windows were easily opened and closed in those days. You were not shut in by immovable glazed glass. Occasionally, you got soot in your eyes, for steam still ruled the rails. And at the end of a journey, you were in need of a good bath, but there was no shortage of water back then, and lifebuoy soap had already been invented. Dehra was the end of the line. The train pulled into the little station just as the sun came up. Coolies buzzed about. A few fond parents were on the platform waiting to receive their children, for there were 3 or 4 of us from Bishop Cotton School who had homes in Dehra. I expected to see my mother on the platform, but she was not there. Not a familiar face anywhere, not even an aunt. Perhaps a servant would be waiting. An elderly coolie dumped my box and bedding roll on the platform. I asked him to wait. We both waited. I sat on my tin trunk while he chewed a pan. No one came. Where do you wish to go, Chota Sahib? Asked the patient coolie. I thought about it. I was a slow thinker, but I did not have all day in which to make up my mind. My mother had written to say she was staying in a house with a lot of lychee trees, but even I knew this was not going to be any help at all. I remembered the way to Granny's house. Perhaps it still existed and my mother would be there. Can you get me a tonga? I asked the coolie. Yes, come with me, Chota Sahib. Plenty of tongas. And he led me out of the station to the tonga stand, where he saw me and my luggage into a waiting tonga, accepted my rupee, leaving with me 3, spat pan juice over a film poster, and went his way. Old Survey Road, I told the tonga driver. He cracked his whip and the pony set off at a leisurely trot. Clip clop through the quiet streets of Dehra. Two or three cars, more Tongas, lots of cyclists. It took the pony cart about half an hour to get me to Granny's house. I got down near the veranda steps, and there was Granny watering the geraniums, joyously absorbed in herself as I remembered her from the last time I had lived in her house. Crazy, her Paria dog, was sitting on the grass some distance away. He recognized me and came bounding up to leap on me and lick my face. Granny was surprised to see me on her steps with my luggage in tow. She rarely smiled, and she made no attempt to do so now. I am home for my holidays, I said. Didn't someone meet you? She asked, frowning a little. No, your mother does not live here any longer. They have a place in Dalanwala. Wasn't she expecting you? I don't know. The school must have informed her. Well, do you know where to go? No. Then I would better take you there, I suppose. Expressionless as usual, she got into the Tonga with me and gave the Tonga driver an address in Dalanwala. Off we went again down the canal road and into a maze of little lanes that all seemed to end in a dry riverbed. After several attempts, we found the right lane and the right house. The front door was bolted from the inside, and we had to knock on it repeatedly before it was opened by a tall and swarthy man in a pajama and shirt who salaamed Granny deferentially. Where is Mem Sahib? Granny asked, sounding more tired than annoyed. The servant told us she and Sahib were away on a shikar trip somewhere in the forests of Motichar hunting tigers. They were not expecting me home so soon, it seemed. But lunch was ready any time I wanted it. Two small children were playing on the grass. Granny took me across to them. These are your brothers, she said. The fair one is your real brother, William. He is 3 now. And the other, the younger one, is Harold, your half brother. They were busy playing marbles and took no notice of me. I will leave you now, said Granny. You can come and see me sometime. And she got into the Tonga and drove away. At least I did not have to pay the Tonga fare. And I was getting used to disappointments. I had thought I was coming home to my mother and baby brother. I did not know she had remarried. No one had told me. I found out from the servant who the Sahib was. It was Mr. H. My mother arrived the next day with Mr. H, who was now my stepfather, in spite of having a wife and two children in another part of the town. They had not been expecting me so soon. They had got the dates wrong. The tiger hunt was also something of a flop as the tiger had failed to turn up. But there would be other tiger hunts and I would be dragged along to some of them. Meanwhile, I was made welcome and even given a small room of my own, which looked out on a rather neglected lychee and guava orchard. A few days later, a small tin trunk arrived from Calcutta, forwarded to me by one of my father's brothers. It contained some books and records and a postcard collection, but no stamps. Where was my father's priceless stamp collection? He had sold a few stamps, I knew, but the bulk of the collection had been with him till he died. It never did turn up, and I suspect that it was sold to dealers by impecunious relatives. So there was in the hamlet of Dalanwala with two small brothers and another on the way, and a mother and stepfather who seemed addicted to parties and tiger hunts. I made no effort to be close to them or to my brothers, and if they made any overtures, it is likely that I rebuffed them. Daddy's death had left me more lonely and self centered than before. Left largely to my own devices, I got into the habit of taking long walks, usually into the fields or tea gardens or the outskirts of Dehra. I had no friends, but I must have been wanting some because I remember I would go down to the railway tracks near the forest when a train was expected and stand there watching the carriages clatter past. One day, a boy sitting at a carriage window waved and called out, "Hey, hello." I kept looking at him till the train had gone, and I went to the same spot the next few days, expecting to see him again so that I could wave back and maybe run alongside his carriage and ask his name and arrange to meet somewhere. On one of my aimless walks, I ended up at Granny's house and asked her if there were any books lying around that I could read. I had never seen her reading a book, but there was always a chance that there would be something tucked away. Books do sometimes turn up in unexpected places. She gave me a religious tract and told me to read it carefully. Never despair has always been my motto, and I called on Granny's tenant next with the same request. Miss Kellner occupied half the bungalow. She was a tiny, crippled spinster in her 60s who had to be carried about by boys in livery and bathed by her ayah. My interaction with her till then had been limited to the occasional greeting or a couple of sentences exchanged if we happened to be in the garden at the same time. Most of the time, she was in fairly good spirits despite her condition. Usually, she sat out in the garden in an easy chair in the shade of a pomelo tree. "Do you have anything I can read, Miss Kellner?" I asked. She was peering into a notebook. She looked up and looked at me over her pince nez glasses. "Yes," she said, and gave me a religious tract. Apparently, religious tracts were all the rage, but hers came with a meringue and a soft nankatai biscuit made by a little bakery down the road. So I promised to read the tract. Dropping in on Miss Kellner for a chat and a snack soon became a ritual of sorts, and I would turn up once a week, even bypassing Granny on one or two occasions. It is surprising what a well stocked larder will do when it comes to making friends with a small boy. So there she was, my first friend after my father's death, an aging lady with a shattered spine, twisted hands, a very large nose, which seemed to suit her, and a frail, bent double body. I seldom saw her out of her chair, except when she was being carried into or out of the house by her helpers. She was always neatly dressed, and I believe the morning bath courtesy her ayah was a ritual she never missed. All her close relatives had over the years passed away, and she was very much on her own. But her late parents had left her some money, which she seemed to manage quite well, employing the ayah, a cook, and four boys whose job it was to carry her into garden and back. When she needed to go out of the house, the boys carried her in a sedan chair, and when she went into town or to visit her friends for parties, they took her around in her private sky blue rickshaw. She was featherlight and she kept the boys well fed. So the rickshaw flew down the road, and I think I once saw her clap her small hands in delight. In spite of her infirmities, Miss Kellner had a healthy complexion and a good appetite. There was a story going around that she bathed in rose water. I could not be so familiar as to ask her if this was true, but I decided to question her ayah on the subject. From my Jamnagar days, I usually got on well with ayahs, and they were fountains of gossip and esoteric knowledge. Tell me, Ayaji, does Miss Kellner really bathe in rose water? I asked quite innocently one day. None of your business, snapped her loyal ayah. And what do you bathe in, inquisitive boy? Donkey's milk, I said mischievously, and allowed her to chase me around a pomelo tree. I could not ask Miss Kellner about her disability either. It was my mother who told me that when Miss Kellner was a baby, some fond uncle had been tossing her high in the air and catching her when he was distracted by something and dropped her. The fall broke her spine and her limbs, which never set properly. She had been an invalid ever since. But mentally, she was very alert. She would do her accounts in a large notebook, and though her hands were crooked, she would correspond with friends or distant relatives. I never found out who they were or where. She had a front room filled with all kinds of bric-a-brac she had collected over the years, and she would get her staff to dust and polish it every once in a while. Soon enough, her ayah grew a little fond of me too. After we had talked for some time and played games, Miss Kellner would say, You must be hungry. And I would immediately say, yes. And she would call the ayah, who knew exactly what was needed and would come with the meringues, patties, and nankatas. I was the only child who would sit and talk to Miss Kellner. There were other young people in the area, including my cousins, who came to visit Granny, but I think they were intimidated by her or unwilling to be around an old and deformed person confined to her chair. Despite my mischievous nature, I was not a very outgoing person, and in those days I was confused and at a loose end. It was our shared loneliness that brought us together. It was not just the meringues she gave me. I found her interesting and oddly comforting. She had time for me as I had time for her. In fact, she looked forward to my visits, which was not something I experienced anymore. At home, in my mother's house or granny's, I felt I was usually on sufferance after my father died. This was, of course, not entirely fair judgment. They did not dislike me, and I certainly did not make it easier for them to love me, expecting them to put aside their life and the rest of the family for me, as I thought my father had done. But this sort of understanding comes with age. A 10-year-old is not so forgiving. I continued to spend time with Miss Kellner during my holidays for the next 5 or 6 years. And sometimes she wrote me cards when I was back at school in Shimla. My granny thought a lot of her, but I don't remember seeing them together. Granny kept a great deal to herself, but she valued and respected Miss Kellner. I learned later that she had made it a condition in her will that after she died, my Aunt Emily, who inherited the house, would continue to keep Miss Kellner there. And when my aunt and her family sold the house and moved to New Jersey, they took an undertaking from the new owners that they would not evict Miss Kellner, who lived there till she died in the early 1950s. Thank you very much.